Simply Scuba presents the Deco podcast. Hi everybody and welcome to the Deco podcast. I'm Mark, a former dive instructor, and I'm here to talk about scuba diving and just some interesting things that I spotted over the week that hopefully you'll find interesting as well. Starting off with the Simply Scuba website, not a great deal of sort of changes. There's been a few little sort of added products here and there, but nothing overly interesting. So I'm going to jump straight into social channel updates. The first thing is that Friday's Ask Mark has gone live. So if you want me to answer any of your questions, just let me know in any of the comment sections, and if you want to watch that will be live on YouTube. I talk about, someone asked about what's the difference between a Buellmann and a RGBM algorithm, and Struth, I had to dust off my algorithm knowledge, trying to remember what the difference was on the go, but yeah, a few other quite interesting questions. It was a fairly long one, lots of long questions, which is quite nice. But yeah, if there's anything that you want me to elaborate on, just use the hashtag AskMark in any of the comment section, and I should be able to find it and get to it on next Friday's show. On Sunday, I've got a dive brief on the history of BSAC, the new diving brand to Simply Scuba. I say new; they've been around since like 1934. They're one of the older brands, but they're new to Simply Scuba. So I did a little piece on the sort of the history and a few of the products. So that will pop up on Sunday. I think that's at 5 o'clock GMT. And yesterday on Saturday, there would have been a Google questions on dive computers, where I basically go through Google and answer some of their questions. That's quite a good fun one that I like to do. That's quite easy to go through, and yeah, I just pick different subjects and answer some. People also ask questions from Google, and that's kind of it for social channel updates. So nice and quick, but yeah, let's jump straight into the news, because there's quite a few news stories that I want to cover this week. The first news story that really caught my eye this week was the boat fire. If you haven't noticed, or if you hadn't seen it, there's video footage of a 3-story scuba diving boat that caught fire and eventually sank off Hong Kong's Jin Island in Sai Kung. That was on last Saturday afternoon, local time, and it had 15 people on board. As far as I'm aware, all of the news reports say that everybody got off safely. They were rescued by a nearby boat, and yeah, they basically recorded the fire, waiting for police and emergency services to arrive. And yeah, huge. The entire thing catches fire. You can see all these explosions, which most people say, well, I reckon that's just all the scuba tanks going, because they probably don't have burst discs in them. But yeah, Struth, fascinating video, and it's one of those things where you don't really get a lot of information, even like a week afterwards. I don't know the name of the boat. I don't really know. No one has sort of announced how the fire started, or how they even think that it started. But yeah, all that we do know is that, yeah, luckily all of the 15 passengers were rescued by a nearby boat, and then they were sort of ferried to the Marine Police base in Sai Kung. Yeah, Struth, boat fires, always worrying. But yeah, luckily everyone got off perfectly fine. Some industry news next. This is Sunto. Sunto has actually been sold to a new company. It's not really something that a lot of people would notice if you're not sort of in the industry, or sort of watching this particular news. But yeah, Sunto's parent company, HMS Sports, which itself was acquired by a Chinese investor consortium in 2018, has announced that it's agreed on a transaction to a Chinese company called Li Sheng, and yeah, in 2022 they're going to sort of hand over Sunto. It's one of those things. Suunto's they're a Finnish brand, if you didn't know that, and yeah, this new like ownership just sort of opens up some new doors to Asia, a new market, and all sorts of supply chains and all that kind of stuff. And But the CEO, the CEO and brand president of Sunto, Heiki Norta, reassures that customers that he doesn't anticipate anything about the brand changing. It's not going to you hopefully shouldn't notice anything, at least in the near future. And in a statement, they said, for you as a fan, community member and user of Sunto, this change is actually not a change at all. Sunto brand and our products and digital services, watch update frequency, data protection practices, customer support and service, all of these and more continue normally. We stay committed and focused on developing our high-end products, inspiring adventurous lifestyle, and on protecting our playground. So yeah, Sunto has found a new owner, and it hasn't been sort of that long since they changed sort of hands in 2018. So this will be interesting. See what happens. See if they can make some changes to sort of Suunto dive computers. So give it a couple of years, and we might see some interesting changes and features on Suunto dive computers going forwards. Now, if you're struggling to find a gift for the person that has literally everything, there is a decommissioned Foxtrot class submarine that is going up for sale. It's an old decommissioned Soviet Navy submarine that was decommissioned back in, I think, 1993. It served everywhere from the Soviet Baltic fleets during the Cold War period. Then it was used as a training vessel, and then it was kind of retired and turned into a museum ship since 1998, and internally it's pretty much as it was when it was decommissioned, and it is going up for sale. It's a pretty big submarine, and the complement of, I think it was about 78 crewmen. It had a operating depth of just shy of 300 meters. I don't think it can still go to that, to be perfectly honest, looking at some pictures of it. But yeah, it's 92 meters long, it could last for like 3 to 5 days completely submerged. It's got 10 torpedo tubes, it's got even more sort of information, and they will offer a a complete startup support, which can be provided on request. They're basically saying it needs some minor refitting, but it's ready to be delivered. They're just waiting for sort of enough people to apply for it. But obviously they're only sort of asking for proper people who can afford a 90-something meter long submarine. But yeah, if you want a submarine, there's one going up for sale. There's going to be a link down in the description if you are a collector. Some good news coming out of Egypt, and that's that BSAC Egypt is expanding. It's got even more dive instructors now. They had a couple national instructors, Adrian Collier and John Potton. They travelled out to Egypt, and they're going through the BSAC Egypt sort of dive leader courses, and then they're training the BSAC Egypt dive leaders to become BSAC open water instructors, and they're also crossing over instructors from other agencies to become BSAC instructors as well, so that there's just more and more BSAC instructors out in Egypt, because they're really sort of betting on Egypt, because sort of travel restrictions are starting to ease. More and more people are sort of heading back out. Egypt has always been or the Red Sea has been a fantastic place to go scuba diving, and now if you want to learn how to dive sort of BSAC, you can do it out there. It's going to be a slight difference to training here in the UK to the Egyptian Red Sea, but the head of diving training at BSAC, Dom Robinson, said more BSAC instructors in Egypt is great news, and we're really looking forward to providing further support to BSAC Egypt as they continue to grow. So it's not just going to be a very localized thing, and you turn up to a dive center, you show them your BSAC card, and they go, "What is this?" BSAC is going to be sort of one of the big like training agencies out in the Red Sea, which is lovely to hear. And if you ever have had sort of grief as a BSAC diver out in the Red Sea, which I don't think has ever really been a thing, but you can now see BSAC more and more out there in the Red Sea. The military charity, the Veterans Foundation, has announced a substantial grant of £25,000 to be awarded to Deptherapy to allow them to sort of fund training courses, continuing education, help them return to their roots Red Sea, which is their sort of base in Egypt, and yeah, sort of gets people who have suffered life-changing mental and/or physical challenges to go scuba diving through adaptive scuba diving programs and 24/7 support. It's a wonderful thing. If you've never heard of Deptherapy, they're definitely worth sort of looking into. And yeah, they just help people who have suffered life-changing sort of encounters, and a lot of military personnel, obviously, and they take them out scuba diving, which is sort of both freeing for them mentally and physically. They do some amazing things, and it's wonderful to see that people are sort of offering up these grants to them because they finally see the real therapeutic beneficial effect of scuba diving, and hopefully this will encourage more to follow the same routes as Deptherapy. A Royal Navy sailor has been jailed for 3 months and dismissed from the service after they discovered that he was stealing Special Forces diver watches and then selling them on eBay for up to £500 each. So this was able seaman Joshua Cheetham, and he was working as a storeman on the HMS Kent, and apparently the 26-year-old had been sort of racking up debts, so living outside of his means, and yeah, he was sort of looking on quick ways to make money. So he looked at the sort of 300-meter CWC SBS watches, and yeah, sold them online as sort of built for elite units of the British Forces, the Marines, the Royal Marines, and the SBS, the Special Boat Service, and he sold a bunch of them, making just over £1,600, and by selling like 6 of these watches. Unfortunately, he was caught out February last year when eBay buyers who bought the watches then later contacted the MOD to verify the validity of the watches, and they obviously tracked him down and yeah, caught him. So yeah, he admitted to it, 2 counts of theft and 1 count of fraud when interviewed by the police, and yeah, he was dismissed from the service and sentenced to 3 months in military prison, and he also has to pay the amount of £1,367.70. Yeah, don't steal from the armed forces. They will find out. And the final news story comes from Chatham in Kent, where there's a new exhibition on HMS Invincible that's going to be from the 17th of February until, when was it, the 20th of November this year. If you didn't know, the HMS Invincible has a fascinating story. I think it was originally a French ship that was sort of very different, and as the name suggests, it was a big sort of powerhouse of a warship back in like 1744 when it was first created. It revolutionized warfare at the time. And but it was later actually captured by the British Royal Navy at the Battle of Cape Finisterre in 1747, and after they captured her, they immediately sailed her straight to Portsmouth Naval Dockyard, where the craftsmen basically measured her inch by inch to copy the design and upgrade their current ships, and obviously build new ones. And yeah, then later in 1758, the ship actually ran aground in the Solent, and after several days of trying to refloat her and get her back out to sea, they unfortunately just had to salvage everything of value and leave her where she was. Then kind of lost to history. Most people sort of forgot about the Invincible, and then it was a fisherman about 260 years later who caught one of his fishing nets on something. He just figured it was just anything, and it was only later on that they actually checked out what it was. This was in like the late 70s, early 80s, that they discovered that it was actually the HMS Invincible. So then archaeological excavations began in the 80s, and they continued from 2017 to 2019, and yeah, they managed to sort of raise her and transport her to Chatham Docks, where the first like recreation, the HMS Valiant, the copy, it was actually built in Chatham. So yeah, there's a new exhibition all about its history, how it was built, how it was copied, how it sank, and how it was restored and everything. So yeah, if you're in the area, yeah, definitely check it out. It'll be a fun day out. I'll put links down in the description below where you can book tickets and whatnot. But yeah, search for Diving Deep, the HMS Invincible. Yeah, definitely something interesting if you're sort of looking for interesting shipwrecks and recovery and how to get into that kind of world and sort of see how it's done. On to my product of the week, which this week is the Bochat Focia Comfort Wetsuit. This comes in both men's and women's, ever so slightly differently, mainly in the cut and the design. The women's one has a cool like sort of starfield pattern effect, whereas the men's is a bit more traditional. Men's is just black with like green flashes on it, but it's a good looking wetsuit, and has some fancy details all over it. The first one is up around the neck. It has a little zipper just in front of your neck. So you have an internal section of neoprene that seals around your neck, and then the external neoprene over the top of it is where the zipper is. So that gives you full control of how like snug it is right in front of your neck without compromising that seal. So it's still sealing and slowing the water from getting around inside of the suit, but you can just adjust it so it's a bit more comfortable. On your wrist, on your left-hand wrist, you have a universal computer holder, which is a small section of neoprene that goes to the underside of your dive computer. You kind of thread the watch straps through the neoprene. And then it has Velcro on the sleeve and Velcro on this little section of neoprene, so that when you put your dive computer on, the first thing is that it sticks onto your wrist without having to worry too much about it. So then you can do up that buckle much easier. But then when you're actually in the water, it holds your dive computer from rolling around, sliding up or down your wrist as your wetsuit compresses at depth. So I think that's a wonderful feature. You have zippered cuffs on your wrists and your ankles, so this is great for cold water diving where you're layering up gloves. You have like an internal layer of neoprene which kind of continues straight into your sleeve, and then an external neoprene, so you can layer up your gloves. You have that internal sleeve, the glove goes over the top, and then the external sleeve goes over the gloves, so that's really slowing the water down, so it has to go along zigzag to actually get into the suit. Same thing with your ankles, and you got one of those modern things that you get on a lot of wetsuits nowadays, which is just on your hip. You have a small little D-ring that you can tuck away. It's really tiny. It's only about a centimetre across, but that's for your hood. A lot of hoods nowadays, they actually come with a little clip in the back of your neck. So after the dive, or even before the dive when you're getting kitted up, you can clip your hood onto that. So your hands are free, you don't have to carry it around, there's less chances of you dropping it. But it is quite nice, especially after a long dive, to just get your hood off and sort of get some fresh air, so you can actually hear what's going on. So instead of having to hold on to that, along with your mask and your fins and everything else, you can just clip it off to your hip, and it stays in position. So that's a nice sort of feature. On the inside of the suit, you have a special lining called fire skin. And as the name suggests, it's very warm, which is exactly what you want from a wetsuit. So this is it's a little like a microfiber towel-like material. It's soft against your skin, but it's quite absorbent, which is pretty much what you want from an internal lining of a wetsuit. You want the water to get into it and then kind of trap it, hold it in place so it's not flushing around your suit. But the good thing about fire skin is that it's also hydrophobic. It's not a fan of water, so between dives it actually dries very quickly. It kind of purges it. So when you're putting your suit on for your second dive, it's a bit more comfortable. It's not a cold, wetsuit anymore. I can't promise for the rest of the suit, but at least it's a little bit better than some traditional older linings. But one of the main things about the Focia is the actual neoprene that it's made out of. It's Alaskan, which is a kind of a proprietary type of neoprene, which is a great combination of flexible and compression resistant. So it's perfect for scuba diving. You can bend and flex and move around. You have these big open panels that allow for plenty of flexibility, but it doesn't crush like some other wetsuits. It's always a trade-off. If you make something really flexible, the neoprene tends to crush at depth, so it gets really cold. But this is the sort of the Goldilocks, the middle. It's compression resistant, so you're going to stay nice and warm even at your maximum depth, but you can still move around and bend and flex whilst you're wearing it. So yeah, if you're in the market for a really nice wetsuit that's got lots of clever features on it, specifically designed for scuba divers, yeah, check out the BSAC Focia. And finally, onto my question of the week, which this week is, are integrated inflators practical? So this came from a Reddit post that I saw a few days back, and someone was basically complaining about the an integrated inflator, which if you've never heard of one before, it's basically where they combine your inflator with your octo or an alternate air source. So you can get this as standard with some BCDs, or it's definitely something that you can upgrade certain BCDs to. And yeah, it is basically you get a really chunky inflator that also has a mouthpiece on it. So it still works in the normal way. You have an inflate and deflate button, so you can control your buoyancy, you can control your BCD, but you also have a purge button on it so that it works as a traditional like second stage, so you can breathe from it. It's got a mouthpiece, and the whole idea around it is that you have your primary second stage, the one that you're breathing from, and then if your buddy has an out of air emergency, you give them your primary. They can breathe from that, and you yourself switch to your alternate air source. This is kind of similar to the way that I dive with a long hose primary donate. It has quite a few benefits. I've been over them before, so I'm not going to spend too much time on it here. But I prefer it. I think it's safer because you know that the second stage that you're donating is working, and you've just taken a nice big breath of air. So if you switch to your alternate and it's not working, it's not the end of the world. At least your buddy can then get a decent breath, and then you can sort of buddy breathe from that one working second stage. But yeah, the Reddit post basically went into the practicality of using one as an emergency alternate air source. And yeah, in a lot of cases, it can be tricky because the main one is that if you're having an out of air emergency, you donate your primary, you're breathing from your inflator in effect. You then have to ascend, and you have to control your buoyancy whilst you're breathing from your inflator. So you have to control your BCD and your buoyancy with a flute in effect, because what you're breathing from, you then have inflate and deflate buttons. So it's just something else that you're not really taught in your like entry-level foundational courses. It's kind of a different way of diving. It can be done, but it does take some practice, and it is something that if you are sort of moving over to an integrated inflator, something that you should really practice with your buddy and practice it again and again, just so that sort of muscle memory works, and you can control your buoyancy effectively whilst breathing from your inflator. It has a few benefits, which are the main sort of selling points, in that you don't need an octo. So your regulators can be as simple as your primary, your inflator hose, and a wireless air transmitter. If you really wanted to go a really stripped down regulator, that's about as light as you can get. Like 2 hoses and a transmitter, as long as everything's working, yeah, that's all you really need to go scuba diving with a backup. If you wanted to, I've heard of some divers diving with an octo and one of these, so they can donate 2 second stages at any given time. that's pretty impressive. You just have to double check the sort of the work of breathing and what that first stage is going through. But I think a lot of first stages nowadays do have enough oomph to provide that amount of gas, especially if it's overbalanced. Yeah, the one of the complaints that that the Reddit post sort of had was that he's donating his primary, which would be on like a 60, 70 something centimeter hose, and donating that to his buddy, and oh well, that's a really short hose. Well, yeah, it would be ideal if you could get a long donating hose and kind of tuck it under sort of something on your hip when you're not using it, something more like a DIR long hose setup. So yeah, I think it's one of those things that they are practical, but they do take some practice, and there are some caveats to it. The first one is that the inflator hose, it's not just a standard inflator hose. They usually have a like a C-Gen or a like a Buddy Auto Air fitting, something a little bit larger with a greater airflow. The traditional DIN one that you get on BCDs and dry suits, it's called DIN. It's complicated. A lot of people, as soon as you say DIN, they just think of the screw fitting for a first stage. But the actual sort of fitting that you get on a traditional BCD inflator, also called DIN. A lot of the time we just call it like quick disconnect or something, but that's quite vague. Specifically, it should really be called a DIN quick disconnect. That doesn't have the same amount of airflow that's kind of required for a breathing source. You can inflate your BCD from it fine, and you probably could breathe from it, but for better airflow, yeah, they typically come with a different fitting. So using someone else's regulators is it can't be done. You have to get an adapter or bring your own hose. And yeah, you have to get or you should really get a longer hose for your primary, so that you can donate that and then have plenty of hose length to be able to get yourself and your buddy out of wherever you are without literally being on their hip. So yeah, I think it's always one of those things of, yes, it can be done, but it's not really something that's straight out of the gates, sort of for open water dives or something. It's probably not something that you should be sort of messing with, but it can be done if you're practicing with it, doing it in a safe environment. Then yes, they are a clever way of getting an extra air source down there with you. But yeah, do practice your buoyancy using it, because it is a little bit different, and you are restricted when it's physically in your mouth and you have to breathe from it. Yeah, and also consider when it's serviced, because some people like almost forget about it, because, well, you take your regulators in for a service, that's fine. You almost forget about your inflator, but of course it's a second stage, so it does need servicing from time to time. Most of them, they're not the fanciest of the fancy like second stages. It's not like you're getting a top of the range second stage built into that sort of inflator, but most of the time it's a fairly decent second stage, and you shouldn't be able to sort of notice too much of a difference breathing from that compared to a traditional octo. They'll have slightly different like breathing characteristics, but actually in the grand scheme of things, you should be able to breathe from it perfectly normally, as long as it's serviced and in sort of good working order. But yeah, I have used them before. It's not something that I use frequently, but I don't think it's unusual to see one on a dive boat, and yeah, I wouldn't worry if my buddy was using one. But I don't know. Let me know what you think down in the sort of comments below. Have you ever used them before? Are they? Do you love them? Do you swear by them, or do you hate them? I think they're quite clever. They're a clever way of cutting down the amount of equipment that you have. But yeah, like sort of air trim and sort of i3 inflator systems on BCDs just takes a little bit of training, because all of our training is built on that traditional universal setup. As soon as something's a little bit different, it gets a bit too complicated for some scuba divers. So yeah, you do need some sort of repetitive training to make sure that you can use it effectively. And that's it for the week, this rather rainy, drizzly, cold January. Yeah, if you've got any interesting news, let me know down in the comments below, or sort of send me a message over on our Instagram. That's usually the best way to get hold of me. If you have any questions, comments, queries, or corrections about anything that you've heard, again, sort of let me know. And if you use the hashtag AskMark, I'll try and address it in the Friday show. Don't forget to follow us, subscribe, do all that social media good stuff. Lots of ticks and thumbs up and 5 stars and things wherever you can. Remember to head over to simplyscuba.com. That's basically what pays my wages. So yeah, head over. We've got all sorts of interesting scuba diving stuff. If you're buying stuff, we have some 0% finance options to make your life a little bit easier. Scuba stuff isn't always the cheapest, so if you can break up the payments using something like Klarna, just makes your life a bit easier. And we have Adyen, which can sort of protect your details, encrypt things, and do all sorts of clever stuff whenever you're buying stuff online. Remember 2 Minute Foundation, which is one of our charities, and they just encourage people just to take 2 minutes out of their days just to sort of help clean up their local environment. And if you're going on a dive, why not take 2 minutes just to sort of clean up, see any sort of marine trash that you see on your safety stop or something, and just get it out of the water. Thank you for listening, everybody, and of course, safe diving.